Well, it's time for another Give First podcast episode. Today I'm talking with Yoav Lurie and Justin Segall, the co-founders of Simple Energy. In addition to being awesome co-founders, they're the subject of a chapter in Give First, the book, in which I use them as an example in being Socratic. Their chapter is titled The Near Death of Simple Energy. And it talks about a moment in Yoav and Justin's experience leading Simple Energy where the company almost died, and how one experience with me, being Socratic in the context of a mentor, was really helpful to them. So let's use that and talk about that as an example and get to know Yoav and Justin a little bit better.
Hi, everyone. This is David Cohen, and I'm here with my amazing co-host,
Brad Feld.
Hey, Brad. And this is the Give First podcast. And in the startup world, Give First means simply trying to help anyone, especially entrepreneurs, without any expectation of getting anything back. So we'll be talking to mentors and founders about what Give First looks like in action and how it makes great entrepreneurship possible.
We polled everyone, and they said consistently that their favorite part of the show was the legal mumbo jumbo. So here it is. The following discussion is an expression of personal opinion and does not represent the opinion of Techstars or any company we discuss. Our conversations for informational purposes only, including any mention of securities or funds. This is not legal, business, investment, or tax advice and is not intended for use by any investor. Certain of Techstars funds own or may own in the future securities in some of the companies discussed in this podcast. Got it?
Well, it's a sunny day in Boulder, and I am talking to two really longtime friends now. Justin, Yoav, it's great to see you guys.
Good to see you. Great to see you, Brad.
It's pretty cool to see you sitting in the same room. Like, I didn't even know that people sitting in the same room was a thing.
It wasn't going to be. And then he texted me.
We were all going to be remote all the time, right?
Yeah. It was all remote from roughly the same place, like within a couple miles of each other. That would have been great.
Fun to get together.
It is. It's good to see you together. You both look happy. So let's give the audience a quick intro to both of you, and really sort of the starting arc of Simple Energy, how it came about, and what it was.
Yeah. So we, Justin and I, were best friends in college. We both went to Duke together, and he was actually the very first person I met in college. So a couple weeks before school started, we took a backpacking trip through the wilderness of North Carolina, and immediately kind of started talking about starting a company together. All of the early ideas were terrible, and we won't share those all with you, but they were the kind of things that 18-year-olds on their first week of college would come up with. And about 10 years after that, having graduated and gone on and done other jobs, we got back together to first talk about, could we build a company together? And that was the first question, which was, I think, and I still think, is the most important question. Just two founders who want to work together, well before figuring out what we wanted to do. And then we said we worked through a lot of issues. We still have a long doc about can we work together? Mm-hmm. And then on the other side of that, came up with a list of here are all the ideas we have. And we narrowed it down to just a couple of them. And, without no pun intended, we asked ourselves, like, where's the energy? Like, where are we being drawn? And this problem of how consumers relate to their utilities. When I say it like that, it doesn't sound as exciting as we felt.
That sounds like, let me go to sleep and take a nap.
Yeah, people.
I really relate. I relate to my utilities. I stare at my Nest thermostat and just.
Yeah. And this was before Nest, and actually the very first idea we had was a very simple thermostat. We basically said people aren't going to relate to their utilities, so let's automate it with a simple thermostat and do that. And then we started going into the market and realizing, there's a challenge before that, which is how you get it into the market. And we think we can use gamification and all of the tools of behavioral science to get people to care just a little bit more about their energy use. And I'm glad we did it, because Nest ended up coming out about a year later with a sexy thermostat that would have blown us out of the water. And by that point, we were already selling into utilities. And it's actually funny how we ended up getting into Techstars or moving to Boulder in the first place. I was living in Washington, D.C. Justin was living in Denver, working in Boulder. And I went, and it's really funny because we're talking about your book, and you and I met at a Cooley conference room near the airport, near Dulles Airport, right back before they had a downtown DC office, and you were on the book tour with Cohen. And I remember
That
stopping
was
you.
a Do More Faster book tour.
Yeah, that was
I remember that.
2010.
I remember that Dulles Airport Conference Center.
Yeah. So I said, I pitched you on the idea, and you told me a couple things. You said Foundry is never going to invest in it because we don't do deals like this. You're going to apply to Techstars, and you're going to get in, and you're going to move to Boulder. And Tim Enwall, who's the founder of Tendril Networks, is going to be your lead mentor, and it's going to be great. And really, all of those things ended up being true. And we'll get back. Tendril comes up in the story at the end, so stay tuned for like the end of the story too.
That's cool. So you were which Techstars Boulder program were you in? It was the third one or the fourth one?
2011.
2011. So that would have been 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, fifth one. So you let's just time travel back to 2011 for a sec. What was it like to go through Techstars Boulder in 2011? What was the experience?
Oh man, I mean, we were in the bunker, so the old gym in the basement there, and we still describe that as the rocket ship under our ass to everybody else. For me, being the one who was customer and market facing, the first month when it was go talk to as many customers as we could, we put up a board on the wall in the bunker, and it was go talk to 40 utility executives in the next 30 days, which was crazy because at that time, if I reached out to any utility executive, if I got a single meeting within 30 days, it was rare. But this was the forcing function of Techstars of, we're going to go do 40 customer development calls in the next 30 days. And the great thing was that we had a reward, which was we had a conference coming up in New Orleans. And Yoav told me we couldn't go to Cafe Du Monde and we couldn't have beignets if I didn't hit the goal. And I love hitting goals and I love beignets. And so, we used every lever we could. We reached out to people we'd met at conferences. We found one mentor who had just retired as a utility executive, and I said, we're in Techstars, and this is the thing we need to do. So I need you to introduce me to every utility executive that you can, and I need to talk to them for 30 minutes for customer development. I'm not going to sell them anything. I just want to get their feedback on our product. And lo and behold, we went to Cafe Du Monde a month later, and we got beignets. And the crazy part about that a decade after that, I could look at our revenue and trace tens of millions of dollars of contracts to those conversations.
Wow.
That never would have happened if Techstars hadn't been like, go do customer development and actually go talk to the buyers and get their feedback on the product. And it was amazing as we get through, more of the story of Tim Enwall was our lead mentor, who had been the founder of Tendril Networks, which was a similar company in our space. We closed our round shortly after Techstars, and we didn't have a lead. It was a party round with a bunch of angels and mentors who we'd all met through Techstars. And as we come through to the story, they come back again in really important ways of how we didn't die. And so I think for us, that time, that experience, both amazing, a lot of fun, I think fondly of the time in the bunker, and also really just that catalyst to building something that I'm quite certain we wouldn't have built and wouldn't have survived without the people who we met and still know today. So
in the end, just to frame the next question, I think that the final exit for the business was about $1.5 billion valuation. Is that right?
Not about. It was exactly. Yeah, but you got it on the nose.
And I remember pretty good.
Yeah.
So that was the ending outcome. What I want to talk about today is I want to talk about the moment in time where Simple Energy almost died. And I write about this in my new book, Give First, The Power of Mentorship. The story, the subchapter is the near death of Simple Energy. And it's in the first of 18 chapters on the Techstar Mentor Manifesto. It's the first item, which is be Socratic. Let's do two things. One is I'd love to hear, or tell me for the audience, the story of how you almost died and what happened. and what happened that caused you not to die. So sort of constrain it in those windows, and maybe sort of think about how to weave into that, not just the facts of what happened, but the way you interacted with me and other mentors during that period of time to get to not dying.
So Justin mentioned that our first round coming out of Techstars was a party round, lots of angels, lots of small checks. About a year change later, we did another one of those. About a year after that, and then about a year after that, we finally did a kind of a proper VC-led round, $6 million. The problem with that round, though, was that our VC put a tremendous amount of pressure on us to move really fast, right? To spend fast, to hire executives, because he said, look, you need to have a lot of talent and who's done it before. So it's sort of manager mode, founder mode. He's like, you need to hire some managers, and also one of his largest LPs, or a couple of his largest LPs, who were probably half his investor base, were large European energy companies. And so he was sort of pitching it to them about, look at this amazing company. He's like, you need to grow in Europe. You need to set up an office there. You need to hire some people there. You need to sell to them. And so that was creating a lot of pressure on us to grow really fast. And if I look back at it, we had not gotten to 100% product market fit. We were doing $4 million in annual recurring revenue, but it was tenuous. It was in a market where someone else had really already established themselves as the category king, as the winner of that market. And for us to scale, we were going to need to pivot. We were going to need to find something else that we could win in the utility market. We say most markets are winner take all or winner take most, but in the utility space, even more so, because they're so risk averse and they all share information.
And so that competitor was another venture-backed company, right? That was, I think it was Opower.
Yeah, so Opower, which to this day, I'm still friends with the founders, and they're pretty incredible entrepreneurs. But they were, as sort of in a way that you can be with your friends, right? Like, I mean, we weren't close friends then by any means. We were competitors, and we would beat each other up as much as we possibly could. And they were winning. They'd raised a lot of money, and they had a lot of credibility, and they had, most importantly, a lot of peer-reviewed, definitive results that the industry really cared about. The industry has a process of kind of verifying that the things utilities do actually perform in terms of energy efficiency, actually like having the impact that they say it will. And they had cartloads of results, and we had like a white paper. And so we were just getting our butt kicked, even though we were winning on the edges of their business. And so we had this idea that we'd build this new business, but it was slow getting there. And so we came to this moment where we hadn't cut spend. We continued to spend and spend. And so as we got into that year, we started the sale process. Weren't going to be able to raise more money, weren't growing fast enough, and actually went to Opower, and they gave us an offer that was not it was definitely not a great offer for our investors, and it would have been a good offer for us in terms of what our outcome would be. They had gone public. There was some public stock, and they would have incentivized us mightily. But for us, there were a couple of problems with that. One was we really valued our early investors. They, people like Techstars and Tim Manuel and folks who were with us at the very beginning, and they would have gotten nothing. And two, it didn't feel right for us to benefit and not pay through the capital stack. And three, we had a new product in the wings that we had not like fully gotten out to market, and we really believed in it. So we really wanted to see that come to pass. So we turned down that offer. And I remember sitting in a taxi in Washington, D.C., and the morning after the meeting, and I was visibly unhappy. And the cab driver asked, man, why are you so upset? I'm like, well, I'm flying home to lay off most of my team. Like intrinsically, I knew that's what I needed to go do. Pick up
I had to leave that meeting early to go get on a plane to Europe to go try to make a deal happen that still never happened. But yeah, I think the part I would add to that is, I think there are pieces of that on just our own instincts of where we felt like we weren't spending the way that we should. The values on the wall didn't, in the way they're getting reflected in the way that the company operated, didn't feel like us. It felt like, and literally we had somebody else on our team write the words. We had let somebody else take the verbiage of our values. And Yoav and I would talk about it. We're like, it just doesn't feel right. And, but we didn't trust ourselves for whatever reason to go act on that. Like, we just kind of kept going because we're like, well, our investors, I guess our board knows better. We're first time entrepreneurs. and we didn't trust ourselves on that. And so, we found ourselves in this place where we had 18 days of cash left in the bank at the beginning of May. And, we sort of knew we needed to cut costs. We knew we needed to bring money in. And the conversations had basically come to something that, again, was going to be a really terrible recap, cramming down investors that basically would wipe everybody out. And the conversations we had was, these are people we might see at Thanksgiving dinner or we might see in town who are our friends. And how are we going to feel if the way out of this is something that royally screws them because of something that ultimately we screwed up? And like, ultimately, we were responsible for the spending and the hiring and the things we did. Like, we had agency, not these people. Right? And like, how's that going to feel if the way out of this is something that crams them down and wipes them out? And we end up there. And the thing that we were both really clear on when we looked deep at our individual and, at this point, we've known each other for 15 years by this point, our shared values of that was not going to be something that we could sleep at night with. We said, we got to find another way. But we didn't really feel like we knew exactly what that was. And so that was actually when we reached out to you, is we said, who can help us think through, like, there's got to be another way. We're not convinced that it's like die or screw people who we care about over. There's got to be another way. And so then we said,
and that was sort of the context for the phone call that we had. we were like, hey, so here's our shit show. Help.
Yeah, and I think what I'd add to that is just like personally for us, right? We were personally guaranteeing debt. At this point, we were both charging stuff to our credit cards to make sure that we could make payroll. We both had one young child, and another, in my case, another one on the way for later, who's due a few months later. And so it felt existential, right? Like,
it was a calm, mellow moment in your lives.
Yeah, totally chill. Yeah.
No big deal.
So that was the context in which we said, hey, Brad, help. And you told us a couple things. You said, one, call your lawyer, because it turns out that there are different fiduciary responsibilities that we had to our debt provider. We had venture debt at the time with Silicon Valley Bank, and the responsibilities under Delaware law that we had to our shareholders. And we had no idea about that. So you were like, you need to understand that. And Mike Platt from Cooley actually came over to our office that afternoon and helped us with that, and helped us understand that and some options. And then the second thing you said is that you would clear your calendar for Monday morning and then we should come to your office. And so that's what we did. We came to your office on Monday morning, and you start to ask us a lot of questions. You certainly kept asking us why, right? But you also, the question that always stuck with me was kind of like, is it worth it? Like, wow, you're about to do like brain surgery, or like a heart transplant. What's life going to be like on the other side of it? And is it worth it? Are you going to still have good quality of life? Is the patient going to survive? And we were like, and I'm not sure that the answer is yes in most cases, but in our case, it was definitively yes for a couple of reasons. One, we really believed in this new product. And two, we actually had definitive contracted known payments where we had customers who were going to pay us money. And we had, like, over the summer, we were going to get $1 million. That was already on the books. It was just scheduled to come in. So we were like, we just need to live that long. But this was before we did the layoffs, and we talked about, okay, how we're going to do each step, and then why each step. And you kept asking questions, and um, and I think we came to you hoping you would have an answer. You go see Brad, he tells you some like what you do, and you didn't tell us what to do, unfortunately. But we weren't upset about that because I think collectively we felt like we got to a really good answer, right? Which was, unfortunately, lay off 2/3 of the team, but also rebuild the company in a way that was aligned to our values in terms of the actual values on the wall, as well as being cash flow positive, focused on the kind of cash fundamentals and revenues of the business and costs, and just really buckling down and focusing on the people, the values, and the product. And so we did that. We completely reset the business. We raised $1 million in debt from the board through a convertible note, and then and laid off about 2/3 of the team in a way that allowed us to get to those future payments, allowed us to refinance the debt, allowed us to launch the new product, and ultimately, over the course of the next 3 years, allowed us to grow revenue by over tenfold. And that was kind of all back to that initial like, Brad, what the F are we going to do conversation.
Yeah. So I remember that. I remember that conversation well. I also, when you called me, I knew what Simple Energy did, and I knew you guys what you're doing, but I wasn't an investor. I was, indirectly an investor through Techstars, but I wasn't really very close to what was going on in the business. And I very deliberately didn't tell you on whenever you called me over the weekend, and I said, let's get together first thing Monday. I didn't say, send me a bunch of stuff, right? Send me all your old board packages. Let me look at the pipeline. Let me dig into it. I deliberately came to that meeting, with what, Jerry Colonna would call beginner's mind, sort of classic Buddhist approach. But, I didn't want any preconceived notions that were colored by anything. I wanted to just be in a position where I could look at you guys and listen to you and try to sort of understand in real time what was going on. One thing I really remember from that meeting in the relatively beginning part of the conversation is both of you were very distressed, and you sort of alluded to it earlier. You're really distressed about the decisions you had made that led you to this point, and how they didn't feel like, with you sitting in this moment, they didn't kind of feel like you kind of were almost, playing a role in a game that you felt like you had to play because you'd taken money from these VCs and they were telling you to do this. And, very early in that conversation, was where my comment was, well, if you do all this shit, what's it going to feel like on the other side? And one of the things I remember, and I don't remember which of you said it. I remember one of you said it. I think it was Yoav. Was this notion of, something like, shit, we're just not listening to ourselves. And it was something like that. And if you sort of teleport back to that, and you have a moment where you then go back, you leave the discussion with me. Obviously, I'm sure I was directive about a couple of things, but I didn't say this is the answer. I do remember, the conversation about what's your source of cash to make the payroll after the one you can make. And the answer pretty clearly was, if your existing investors aren't willing to pony up some money so you have some time, you're dead. And so don't play a game. Just tell them this is the story. Like if you want to keep playing, we got to do this. If you don't want to keep playing, we're dead. Of course, they wanted to keep playing. So once you declared that, it happened. But what was the emotional change like when you start to think about the next day, the next week, the next month, where after you'd realized that you weren't, living your values, making decisions the way you wanted to, trusting each other to just say, this is what we got to do to make a successful business?
One of the ways I described that I described later was, imagine you went into a store and you found a really nice jacket, like beautiful, from like a great designer you've always wanted. And not only that, it's like 90% off. The only problem is it's like a half size too small. And so I often felt like we were living this like life that just didn't fit. And we were always like we're not that fat, but like we're fat man in a little coat the whole time. And living the values, it felt like we finally had a different coat, but one that actually fit. And it felt like our own. We ended up putting up new values, and the new values were divisive and they were clear. Like we had people who left the team because of them, and that's great. I think good values should. And they were us. And I often say that those years, after we did the riff, after we reset, 1 year to the day from when we laid off 2/3 of the team, we signed a $10 million contract, $10 million a year, or $10 million contract with the largest utility in the country. We rolled out a cart of champagne and sparkling apple cider. It was like such a celebration for the team, and the 3 years were in the best years of my career, even with all of the future huge successes that we had.
Yeah, I think which is crazy because here we are sitting. I mean, this was 10 years and 3 days ago that we did the riff. So it's as I was getting ready for this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like almost 10 years to the day. I think for me, what I'd add is there was a renewed energy from sort of whence we came, which is to say, why did we start this in the first place? Because it was almost like the refounding, and as we talked about the company lore, over the years, we really talked about these different chapters. And I think actually, the next day, literally, we were back in your office. You had said, "I'll give you a conference room, bring your executive team here, and work here until you guys have this figured out." And we figured out. We made some of the hard decisions that we needed to make of how do we go forward, and we held to that until the board created the bridge for us to do that. We weren't executing the riff because we weren't going to lay people off only for the company to fold days later. And we were able to do that. We were able to get our earliest investors, those same people who invested in us out of Techstars, to come in and invest, and which gave us more runway. And then we got back to like the basics of the things that I think we know and do best, which is to say, we put a goal on the board. We literally rolled whiteboards into our office. And it was like, here's how much cash has to come in the door to have a holiday party this year. And here are all the ways that we can do that. We can sign new ARR that gets paid. We had launched our marketplace product, so we had transactional revenue that could happen each day. And we could reduce spend. And that was something that literally everybody remaining on that team had agency over. And when they could do that, there were sticky notes that were sitting there and markers for them to go put up on the board and write what happened. That fundamentally changed how everybody's orientation of their day. The other thing that we did, when Yoav and I've talked about this with each other and with others, when they ask us, they're like, how did you turn it around? And we're like, values and culture. And they're like, what? So there was another Techstars company who had gone through Techstars called RoundPeg, which had a great tool that we loved that assessed your values. And Natalie, one of the founders of RoundPeg, was like, diversity is great in all respects, except for when you have diversity of values, because then people don't have a way to align in how they work. And they gave everybody a score of 0 to 100. When we took it right after the riff, we were an 8 out of 100. We were literally the worst company in their database. So if that wasn't data to prove like what we were feeling inside, we were like, yeah, that's part of why this is really grating, because we don't have clarity of how we communicate and how we make decisions. So we made changes about the values, about the day-to-day operating. We started communicating that out with transparency and clarity to the team, to investors, to the board every week, much to sometimes our team's chagrin of like, why are we doing this? Because everybody needs to know exactly where we are, because then everybody has agency for how we get there. And then the things that we started to do, we interviewed everybody that we hired. Because we wanted to make sure that we were building, there was a value add, that they were a culture add to the team. And it was also really great feedback for us because we were at the end of the interview process. And so hearing the reflections from candidates about the team, and how was the interaction with the people, and what was it like, and what was their take on this company, was really great data. The last thing I'll add just about this sort of immediate chapter is like one of the things that came out of this is, again, back to the power of mentorship. Walt Winshaw, who is one of our investors and mentors that I know, longtime friend of yours. I was sitting in his house in Massachusetts, and we were talking about these challenges we had. And Walt had built a business selling software to libraries in the early days. And he looks at me and he says, Justin, why are they not paying you more faster? And I just remember being floored and being like, what? That's a great question. He said, with libraries, I figured they had the money. I didn't have money. So I just charged them for the contract up front. And then they paid me. And then I used that to grow the business. And I was like, that's the simplest thing that I don't know how I've never thought of that idea. Oh my gosh. And that was over the summer of 2015. And then by Thanksgiving, we had signed new contracts that brought a couple of $1 million of cash in the door before the end of the year. That, along with all the other things that we were doing in the other buckets, had given us the runway that then we were out of the needing to put a sticky note to get on through the end of the year. And so I think for me, just as I reflect on that, it's the, and to some of the topic of the conversation of the power of mentorship, of just, that, some of these are things that maybe you or Walt or others had said to us of like, go do this. But at the end of the day, we and our team had to go execute it. And having somebody to either hold up the mirror to help you see where we weren't living our values, or where we weren't trusting ourselves, or we weren't doing something, or just plant a seed with like, what about this slightly different way of looking at it than the way that you were? And what could really be transformational, both to the company's outcome, but also just really importantly, if I reflect on my own personal experience on that journey, from the depths of the darkness that much of that time was, to this being, as Yoav said, I think probably the most fun and exciting and exhilarating chapter of my career.
Brad, you've got this book, The Power of Mentorship, and I know we're in the section about being Socratic, but I can't let you go without telling you about one other thing you did.
Go for it.
Which is a thing that now I've now invested in, dozens of companies. I'm mentoring still a bunch of them, and it's one of the things I do. And it was after the riff, I remember you started to email me, and there were a bunch of times where I didn't respond. And so instead of just being pissed off about that, or saying like, oh, who is this jerk who's like not responding to the great Brad Feld, you just emailed me the next morning. And it was always like first thing in the morning. It was like just subject line only email. How's it going? Or like, how are you doing? And maybe there'd be a one line in the body, which would be like, thinking about you. Like that was it. It was the question. And then and those emails were unbelievably motivational. Like I remember, oftentimes it was like the first thing I did in the morning was write to Brad Feld, and be like, "Oh, I'm good. I'm getting up. I promise. Like we're getting forward. We're doing this." Because there were, especially in the first few months after we reset the company, that was incredibly hard. And so just checking in. I don't know if you remember those, because there were one-line emails you sent a decade ago, but they were incredibly valuable, incredibly helpful.
That's great to hear. And I'd say, I think, a soft way of saying that is, you didn't have a lot of people. You were carrying a lot, and I know the two of you were carrying a lot, including the riff. But then, like trying to rebuild the company after the riff, family life with little kids and relationship, investor dynamics where, I know at least one of the investors was not being particularly helpful or supportive. And, the comment is, somebody that is near the business all of a sudden is saying, I care about you. Like, if Simple Energy failed or succeeded, I didn't really give a shit. Like, I mean, I kind of did a little bit, because I'd rather you succeed than not, but it didn't really impact my life. But I cared a lot about how you were doing, and wanting to make sure that you knew, even if you didn't need me to be there for you, that I was there if you needed something. And I'm glad that made an impression. It's fascinating to me. Like I have I have people in my world that know me really well, and that know when I'm in distress, and will reach out and check on me, or see me in a certain path where they know me long enough to feel like, Brad, maybe he's putting too much energy into this thing over here. Maybe he's not doing so well. Those little notes, in a world where you used to have to write it on a piece of paper and stick it in an envelope and mail it to somebody. Today, you can do it in 7 seconds. They're so rare. So it's good that hit you well. Let's end with the end of the story, what ended up happening? I looked it up while we were talking. I was curious. I didn't remember what happened to O-Power. Google tells me that O-Power was acquired by Oracle in 2016 for $532 million.
Yeah.
Good outcome. But what happened to
Well,
you?
it was a good outcome, but they had gone public about 2 years earlier for $1 billion. So their public market time
So about a half a good outcome.
was troubled. And ultimately they, this isn't a podcast about them, but I think it's an interesting case study in itself. For us, in we hadn't raised new capital, but we were raising debt, and we kept raising new mezz debt. And in late 2017, we had a PE firm who came to try to buy us, and we were doing cartwheels. I mean, like, we were so happy about the valuation that they were offering, and about the team and everything, and then that they were proposing. And we got really lucky that one of our investors had a call with a corporate, a strategic holding company that owned a bunch of utilities and power producers and others in our space, and they had come up with the idea after 2 years of independent work without talking to us, that there was one company in the world they needed to buy, and it was us. And like, that was like, and then they were like, oh, and now we should call them. And so it was the funniest thing. They called us in the middle of this process. And so we ended up selling them about half the business, and they then became our supporter, offered us $50 million to go start acquiring customers. And we started to do just that, to execute an M&A strategy. We signed that deal in 2018, in April of 2018. By the end of 2018, we were in negotiations with a number of companies and that private equity firm to bring everyone together. And in the middle of 2019, we created what is now Uplight. And I told you, I promised we'd bring Tim Enwall and Tendril Networks back into the story, but the two biggest pieces of Uplight were Simple Energy and Tendril, and two companies that were based in Boulder, selling software to electric and gas utilities. We merged those companies, took the three companies that we were in the midst of acquiring, and had this kind of 5-company roll-up that, from first announcement to last announcement, happened in about 60 days in the summer of 2019. And Uplight, when we put it together, was called $300 to $350 million in enterprise value between the various component parts of it. So that in itself was positive. But then 20 months later, we ended up selling the company again, selling all of Uplight, and changing who was on the cap table. That was $1.5 billion transaction, valuation transaction, in March of 2021 when we did that.
So awesome outcome. What are you guys doing today?
Well, neither of us work there anymore. How about you?
My daughter graduates from elementary school tomorrow, so top of the agenda right now is graduation celebration. And yeah, I'm enjoying still some time off. I left Uplight at the end of 2022, and have been enjoying some time with family. I'd spent the better part of a dozen years on the road, 50 to 80% of the time, and and I think didn't realize the cruft that had built up from all of this that we'd been talking about, of actually just how hard that was and how much that had impacted me. And so I've been enjoying some of that time off, but always making time. And if somebody reaches out to me about a company, entrepreneurs, always an important part of my time. And again, to the give first ethos of it's really great that I've said no to boards and advisory and all of these other things, because I just love being able to say, let's go take a hike, and let me be a thought partner to you, and not being in that place of I have something other than just the entrepreneur's best at heart. And so starting to think a little bit about what might be next, and we'll see.
Yeah, and I got out a little bit before Justin. Traveled the world with my family. Ended up stuck in New Zealand for most of the pandemic, but we moved back to Boulder for a tail end of the pandemic to to continue to raise our two kids here, and have been investing in funds and companies, chairman of a company in a similar space, and actually have just gotten back on the train at a VC meeting yesterday pitching the next new thing, which is a little too early to announce.
Awesome. Well, Yoav Lurie, Justin Segall, it makes me smile to see you guys smile. You've had a great impact on me, sort of watching and participating a little bit in your journey, and just the energy that you put back in to everything in and around Boulder is pretty awesome. So thank you for everything you do and for your awesomeness.
Thank you, Brad. Wouldn't be sitting here without you, for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brad.
Thanks a lot for listening to the show today. We'd love to hear your feedback, ideas, or who you'd like to hear next on Give First. And please leave a rating and review, ideally a good one. And reach out anytime to podcasts@techstars.com, or on Twitter, I'm @David Cohen. See you next time. Don't forget, give first.